This is potentially the most significant moment in the 2.5-year civil war in Syria. We still don't know all the details of what's happened. In fact, we know very few real details, but there's a lot of circumstantial evidence to suggest that there has been a very significant attack using chemical weapons in the eastern suburbs of Damascus. There's a range of things that indicate that. Israeli intelligence says they are confident from their intelligence assessments that poison gas has been used. The White House says it has strong confidence about a chemical weapons attack. And of course there are these pictures on many video websites which are showing people suffering what looks like the effects of a chemical weapons attack. Now obviously one wants to get more detail of that, more firm detail, but there's a huge amount of circumstantial evidence which the Assad regime really does have to now respond to. A UN inspection team is inside Syria as it happens, and it's being asked to inspect allegations of other chemical weapons attacks. And this creates difficulties for President Assad because these people could very easily travel from the hotels that they're in Damascus to the eastern suburbs and investigate them. The US, Britain, France urgently want those inspectors to go there and investigate what's going on. But Russia has been very resistant to allowing that to happen, and the Assad regime is firmly refusing to do so.
وما تبثه قنوات الجزيرة والعربية وسكاي نيوز وغيرها من القنوات الشريكة في سفك الدم السوري ودعم الإرهاب عار من الصحة وهو محاولة لحرف لجنة التحقيق.
But that's creating problems for President Assad, because if he doesn't allow a UN inspection team to investigate, a lot of people are going to draw the early inference that the Assad regime is culpable of what has happened. President Obama said last year that the use of chemical weapons in Syria would constitute a red line for him and change his calculus about how he might respond, although he was a little vague in the terms that he used. I think there's a lot of people inside Western governments who will look at what has happened and really be very alarmed by it, because what you are looking at here is the potential use of chemical weapons in a country with a very significant chemical and biological arsenal, and the deployment of those weapons is taking place inside an urban environment. Now, chemical weapons were used by Saddam Hussein in the Halabja attacks in the late 1980s, and that was the last significant use. But I think people will be very alarmed indeed by the possibility that these weapons have been used in this way, not least because one has to remember that chemical weapons, if deployed correctly, and if the wind is blowing in the correct direction, can kill tens of thousands of people in a single incident if enough of them are deployed in a mass attack. And that is a real worry.
Et donc, si c'est avéré, il faudra qu'il y ait une réaction de la communauté internationale.
Une réaction militaire?
Une réaction, je dirais, j'essaie de trouver le mot, de force. Ouais.
Bütün kırmızı çizgiler aşıldı ama hala Birleşmiş Milletler Güvenlik Konseyi'nde bir karar almak bile mümkün olmadı. Hala bu konuda kırmızı çizgiler ortaya koyan taraflar ve hepimiz için bir sorumluluktur bu.
So there will be a sense, I think, in some governments that a kind of line is being crossed here in terms of what the international community is being asked to accept in terms of the use of major destructive weapons, and that is what is going to cause alarm.
The use of chemical weapons is something that the United States finds totally deplorable and completely unacceptable. And those who are responsible for the use of chemical weapons, if it's determined that that's what happened, will be held accountable.
Throughout this conflict, President Obama has looked very reluctant indeed to get involved in any way in what's going on the ground in Syria. The US remains in the shadow of the traumatic experience it went through with the Iraq and still with the Afghan conflict. And so, although this is very serious, the US response for the time being will not be to try and get heavily involved.
We demand this administration to take action. Enough is enough. 5 incidents have been documented.
But I think what may well now be needed is some kind of much firmer statement from the Obama administration that it simply will not tolerate the use of chemical weapons in this way. It may not set out in detail what its military planning is, but I think there will be a lot of people who will be wondering whether Assad has not now quite seriously miscalculated, and whether a more serious international response may be needed sooner than some people had thought.